everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, you could see everything going on. I'm just checking in on a couple things here. We have Den who is helping out with moderation. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. We will get them addressed as soon as we can. So, been a rough, crappy week. I would say this is probably the worst mental health week for me in a long time. Tuesday was, I knew it was within the realm of possibility that we might lose, but I didn't expect what I saw. I'm guessing a lot of you were unpleasantly surprised too. And I just wanted to take some time right now to just talk about some of the stuff that happened and I guess what we can expect from here. And I will say, if you have any thoughts or comments as we are going through all this section, leave your comments. We'll get to them while I'm talking. We don't even have to wait until the end of the segment. But I guess, and I'm going to be rambly as we go through this. I'll do my best, though. But I guess the thought that went through my head is it was sickening. It was a replay of 2016 with the difference being in 2016, I was shocked that Trump managed to scrape out a victory. And this time I braced myself for it and I was just numb. Like, really? That many Americans still, I know you were around 8 years ago and 4 years ago. I know you lived through the first Trump era and you still don't care. And you still don't know why that was a bad thing. You still want to go back to everything we dealt with for those years. And the answer to that is, I still don't think, and I haven't seen any data to back this up, it's not like people flocked to Trump. He is still as off-putting now as he ever was. It seems like, according to whatever data is out there, that people were just mad about inflation. They were mad about prices of things, as if the president of the United States has a dial that controls egg prices from the Oval Office. And so, just like they did in other countries, so many people who don't care about anything that goes on in the news on any given day, they do not care about the threat that Trump brings to the table. They are not paying attention to the crazy things he says or does. They're not paying to the jokes made at his rallies or anything Kamala Harris is saying about policy. Those people were just like, the prices of eggs are too much, and so I'm going to blame the president, not realizing that if you get Republicans in charge, it's only going to get worse. Yeah, like, I wasn't surprised, disappointed, but not shocked. And I want to say, like, it's not because so many Americans are dumb. It's because so many Americans just don't pay attention to this stuff. They do vote, but like, there are a lot of people who weren't paying any attention to the race. And it's weird, as someone who is obsessed with politics and watches like cable news in my spare time for fun, it is weird to realize, yeah, that I'm the weird one. Most people pay no attention to anything. So this isn't even misinformation convinced so many Americans that they should do the wrong thing. It's that a lot of people, enough to change the outcome, just decided to take it out on the incumbent. Which means if it wasn't Kamala Harris on the ticket, it probably would not have mattered. I think she ran as normal, decent of a campaign as you could have had, given the situation she was in. I don't think a different candidate would have done any better. I certainly don't think Joe Biden would have done any better. But it makes it seem like the whole thing was futile unless Democrats could figure out how to communicate in a certain way. That also brings up the issue of like, back. There we go. I don't know why that tuned out. But I think another thing that concerns me is, how do you reach all those people who don't seem to have any awareness of what's happening or why Trump's ideas, policies would be bad for them? And that's a hard thing to do, because the right-wing ecosystem is, yeah, the average constituent doesn't understand economics or civics, and I don't blame them. Most people do. They have to work. They have a family. They got kids to take care of. They're not paying attention to this stuff. Leave it to other people to figure out. I'm not even mad at them about that. But then the question, well, that was weird. I'm sorry about that. Give me 1 second to get back up to screen. I know they're already coming after me. Give me 1 second here. I'll come back to that in a bit. Dan, if you could just send me a message about the timestamps here, and I'll fix that later. Um, But going back to this comment, I think it's true. I don't think most people understand economics or civics, and I don't expect them to because they have better things to do. They are working, they have families to take care of, and that's fine. The question is, how do you reach people who are not watching the news, who are not reading papers or reading websites or watching live streams like this? And this is where it gets really tough because the one thing the right wing has going for it is they can get all their information from Fox News and just have it injected into their veins. Or Joe Rogan can spread misinformation to a massive amount of people. Not only do those right wing figures have a huge reach, they have a lot of money that is backing them up. And there is a joke that I've probably said before, but like right wing podcasters, bloggers, whatever, they have an infrastructure where billions of dollars are at their disposal. There are people who will pay them tons of money if they're effective at spreading propaganda. Meanwhile, progressive and liberal outfits have like $4 that are rotated amongst all of us. You know what I mean? There is no left wing version of Joe Rogan who can disseminate information to everybody because I think part of it is that being Joe Rogan, being an alpha male type, being someone who is so confident about everything, that requires you to just say, I'm right, this is the way it is, and everyone else who's not me is wrong. And quite frankly, people who are liberal have the ability to have nuance in their thinking that this is why I believe I'm right. This is what the facts say, but here's where there's room for disagreement. That is not this, that's never going to generate the same audience as someone who just says, this is the way it is. I'm right here. You just need information. I'm your like metaphorical daddy, and I will tell you how it is. Like that sort of arrogance is not on the other side, which makes it really hard to reach people. And there's no billionaires saying we will pay for groups to create an information environment like that. So it's really hard to reach those people. And that makes it harder too. Um, this comment, US presidency has a 2-year term limit, so I'm a little soothed that Trump won't be running again. See, I don't know about that. This is my fear. He could very well, I'm sure they've already started making this case that the Constitution says like you can't serve 2 consecutive terms. And therefore he can run again if he wants on a technicality. And no Republican's going to say no to that. And it doesn't matter how old he is. So like, I don't know why we're relying on traditions and norms at this point because those are out the window, right? So anyway, so that part is frustrating. That I think we got beaten by going on. I don't know what's going on with that. Jen will send me the timestamp. Sorry about that. I don't know what the gremlins online are doing. But this, yeah, this point. Thank you for that donation. This is what the point I'm trying to make. Gaza did not change the outcome and the protests against Biden's policies. Ukraine didn't do it. Inflation didn't do it. They all did, but also, I don't know. I think it was inflation more than anything that was discussed at a granular level by all these activists and groups. A few million people didn't bother to turn out for each of these issues. I mean, you're not wrong about that. Dems didn't listen. Guys, I don't know what is going on tonight. I'm so sorry. We'll fix it up when I post it later. Then we'll send me the timestamps. Um, I want to make sure I answer this. Uh, I agree with you that Dems didn't listen and Joe Biden didn't listen. But the the thought I kept having this week is that even if Kamala Harris pivoted on the Democrats' stance on Israel and Gaza and did what so many activists wanted her to do, I don't think that would have changed much of anything. Like even if she wins Michigan, that wasn't enough to win the presidency. So add it up, fine. But I think if inflation wasn't the issue, if people actually understood that Donald Trump is going to make their prices worse, it's going to make prices higher, it's going to put less money in their pockets, that would have been enough to overcome all the headwinds that Democrats had to go up against. And that's frustrating because then it seems like all these issues we all care about, whether it's foreign policy or church state separation or anything else, how much of it matters? That's frustrating to me. I think this is a reminder that, when Joe Biden won in 2020, that was that was the aberration. That was the election that should not have happened. Like, Trump is the norm. Trump is where America's at because Americans aren't looking for good policies and they're not looking for a leader who actually does stuff. They're just looking for someone who sounds confident and tells them whatever lies they want to hear. And that is frustrating because I care about facts and I care about reality. Yes, the demons are attacking me today, and that's also frustrating. Um, like, it is troubling to me that the year that the pandemic hit us all is also maybe the best year we've had election wise, because people who may not pay attention to news otherwise were paying attention and they needed somebody to take their anger out on. So they decided to vote against Trump, right? That was the highest. More people voted in the 2020 election than this year, even though the stakes were much higher this time around. But okay, let's keep talking about what does this mean now? Because right now, what this means is things are going to be bad for church state separation and civil rights and reproductive freedom, bad for Ukraine, all of our foreign allies, definitely bad for Palestinians. It's bad for science and climate and common sense and all the issues that get us worked up about everything. Those are pretty much gone. Like, they are going to be in big trouble, and we're going to have to play defense on those issues for the conceivable future. And that is troubling to me because I feel like we've been playing defense for decades now. Because even if Democrats are in charge, you still got to do battle with the Supreme Court. It bugs me that the worst people pretty much got everything they wanted. That the people who have empathy and expertise and who value what experts say, the people who care so much and who want the best for everyone else, we lost again. Meanwhile, you have Trump, who doesn't give a shit about anybody, who is surrounded by, yes, a lot of very dumb people, but also a lot of very rich people who are only out for themselves. They just waltz in there and they get the credit for doing nothing, while the side that tries to do stuff gets the blame for not being perfect. Like, the standards for the two parties are completely different. The media holds them to different standards. I know this was said, but Kamala Harris had to be flawless. Donald Trump gets to be lawless. And that is infuriating as well. And he's only gotten worse since he was in office the first time around. There is a famous saying that the people who can't remember the past are doomed to repeat it. And we are now going to be ruled by people who will do everything in their power to make sure we don't know history, right? We can't learn about the past. These are the people who have tried to ban books and whitewash American history. We definitely don't want white people feeling bad about slavery. They reject science. They rejected it during the pandemic. They reject climate change. They reject everything we know when it comes to science. They now get another chance to turn their ignorance into policy. I don't know if RFK Jr. is going to become the head of whatever agency he wants, but the fact that that's a possibility should be very disturbing to a lot of people, because that guy doesn't care about science. Whoever Trump puts in charge of the Department of Education, You know they're not interested in public schools, whoever it's going to be. They're going to want to either siphon money to private religious schools, or they're going to want to dismantle the entire agency to begin with. So that's infuriating. Can you just imagine what's going to happen if there's another natural disaster in a blue state? Is that state going to get any help? Are we going to see like another Katrina type event? That's scary to think about. What if there's another pandemic and we have to take precautions as a country to prevent it from spreading? That's not going to happen because the people who spread disinformation are now running the system. I appreciate that, Elizabeth. The Constitution says no one should be elected more than twice, and no person who is, and that includes no person who has held the office of president or acted as president. I just don't think they're going to care. I think they will argue that it doesn't mean that, it means consecutively. So it doesn't matter if they were elected separately. And then if it goes to the Supreme Court, what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do? So, yeah, the Constitution says that. We know what it means. It doesn't matter, does it? Because the people who skirt the law and who ignore the law are now the people who get to write the law. Let's talk about some other aspects of this. What happens when the economy collapses because the people in charge of it are going to destroy it? Who's going to get the blame for that? You know what Trump's going to do. He's going to blame Democrats somehow. The ghost of Joe Biden will control the markets when they are bad. He's going to take credit when things go well. Biden passes the Infrastructure Act. So when bridges get built in a couple of years, Trump's going to be there to like cut the ribbon on the whole thing. And a whole bunch of very gullible Americans are going to be like, well, I guess Trump did it. I saw Obama give a rally speech last week where he said Donald Trump sent a check during the pandemic and he signed his name on it. And people act like he did them a favor, even though Obama sent them checks during the recession and Biden sent them checks for other reasons. And they didn't bother putting their name on it. It's like, well, yeah, why didn't you put your name on it? Why would you call it like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act when you could just call it the Democrats did this because too many of you don't know what you're doing Act or something like that? Why is it always incumbent on our side to reach out to the other side? And you never, like, Kamala Harris made a big deal of saying she would put a Republican in her cabinet, which I promise you no liberals were clamoring for. How many people are asking Donald Trump if he's going to put a Democrat in his cabinet? They would never ask him to do that because they know he would never do it, because Republicans are not expected to play by the same rules. One side is expected to be the adults in the room and reach out to people who disagree with them and deal with bad faith attacks from their own side and the other side. And Republicans are held to no standards whatsoever. And that's what's going to be annoying too, because who's going to call them out on this stuff? Okay, so this comment is that the Republican Party has imploded. Democratic Party has failed. Maybe it's the time for a solid third party. Maybe, but what party is going to be able to get the level of interest? It's not Jill Stein. She's back in her cubbyhole for the next 4 years. She's not doing any work. What third party candidate can get the interest that the Democratic Party has right now with its infrastructure and national, like everyone knows who the Democrats are nationally. I say this as a frustrated Democrat, but there is no third party. It would be nice if there were. It would be nice if we functioned like Parliament in other places, but we don't. We have a two-party system. There is no third party right now, which means Democrats are expected to be the big tent for everybody, and the Republicans can cater to a very small tent of very angry people, and then they bring in the most uninformed people in the country, and that's enough. That tends to be enough. So I don't buy this argument that I would love to have a third party that matches my views on a lot of things, because the Democrats don't do it. That party doesn't exist right now. And there's no reason to think it's going to be up and running and powerful enough in a matter of a couple of years to do anything of that nature. Also worrying, the Senate is now in Republican control. That means, practically speaking, Donald Trump can appoint any nominee he wants to any cabinet position, agency, department lead, and he will get everybody approved. Imagine what that means for the Supreme Court. He can just, You can expect Samuel Alito to retire any minute now. You can expect Clarence Thomas to retire any minute now. Maybe not Clarence Thomas because he's got nothing better to do. But like I think someone put it in the Atlantic today, like Samuel Alito is ready to retire. He wanted to overturn Roe v. Wade. He did it. He caught his white whale. He's got nothing else to do. Those 70-year-old guys can retire at any second, and Donald Trump will replace them with a fetus wearing a MAGA hat. And they will have, literally, Donald Trump will have then appointed the majority on the Supreme Court. He will own the Supreme Court all by himself. Why? Because Senate Republicans are just going to rubber stamp anyone he nominates. Doesn't matter what their credentials are. Doesn't matter what their judicial philosophy is. And that's frustrating. Like maybe there was hope that Joe Biden ultimately has nominated one person. Donald Trump nominated 3, and he'll get to do another few this time around. So that's infuriating to think that we are losing the court. The only silver lining there is a lot of the battles we're going to have over the next several years will take place in courtrooms, just like they did during the first Trump administration. And the only silver lining to a fully Trump-owned Supreme Court is that most cases never get that far. Lower court judges can take care of most of the issues, and the Supreme Court just doesn't have time to get around to destroying everything. I don't know if that's good news or bad news. Democrats could theoretically right now flip the House. Doesn't look like they're going to. If they're able to do that, at least they can stop bad legislation from getting passed. Not that I'm worried that Republicans are going to do much with legislation. But it looks like they're not going to do that either, which, I mean, part of me took some delight in that in a perverse sort of way, because if Republicans have a trifecta, and the thing is, they don't know how to govern. They're not interested in passing policies that are going to help people. So if they have total control of government, I want to say you can actually blame them for everything they pass and don't pass, because they should be able to get everything done. My fear is that they will still find a way to blame Democrats for anything they do that is going to hurt people, right? Even if Democrats manage to win the House, they will only control 1/6 of the federal government, right? They don't have the executive, they don't have the judicial, they have half the legislative branch. So I wonder, does a Supreme Court justice even have to have a background in law? No, they don't. They do not. There are no rules. You would think they should have experience as a lower court judge or an appellate court judge, and the answer is nope. Doesn't matter. I mean, George W. Bush back in the day nominated his personal lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. And Harriet Mier would have been horrible, but you know what? Because she was shamed out of being the nominee, that's how we got Sam Alito. So, yeah, you can nominate anybody you want. I've seen someone suggest Sonia Sotomayor, who has health problems, should step aside right now while Democrats have the Senate and Joe Biden, and he should nominate Kamala Harris to be the Supreme Court justice, which is stupid. She's 60. Why would you do that? But no, you don't have to have, there are no rules. Could be anybody. I wonder what's going to happen with the Supreme Court. I wonder what's going to happen with the legal battles and what they're going to try to do. It's scary that J.D. Vance is going to be a heartbeat away from the presidency, because he's also just an online troll, but he's young and he's evil. Like he could do a lot of harm. Let's talk about Project 2025, right? Like that was the internal playbook that we were rightly told is very scary in terms of this is the agenda that Trump wants to enact. Trump's people want to enact. The people who wrote Project 2025 are his former administration officials. And that could be frightening. I'll talk about that in just a second in terms of the specifics over what that could include. I wanted to mention that, there were some bright spots in the election. Like we elected 2 Black women to the Senate. We elected a trans person to the House. There were states like Missouri and New York and Arizona and Nevada that enshrined abortion rights in their state constitutions. Now, I don't know if that'll matter if the Republicans manage to get a national abortion ban through, which they want to. I wonder how many of them are worried that if they do that, it'll unleash a dragon, and they're better off just letting things be chaotic right now. Even in Florida, they got 57% support to put abortion rights in their constitution. But in Florida, the rules are weird. You need 60% to get that sort of thing done. So technically failed, even though the abortion rights side had a majority. I didn't want to be just a downer this whole time. I want to remind you, some of you are old enough like me to remember this. George W. Bush was elected in 2000. I didn't want him elected. It was scary when he got elected, and it was bad. I mean, 9/11 happened and stuff. It was really bad with George W. Bush. I thought in 2004, enough Americans would have been so done with that guy that they would have booted him out of office with room to spare. And obviously, that's not what happened. He got reelected, I think, with even bigger margins or something. And that was disappointing. And I think I still felt the same type of numbness back then that I felt this week. It's been that long since that's happened. The one silver lining is that things eventually got so awful and people were so fed up with him and his administration and their incompetence and cruelty back then that it seemed like more people than just the politically active ones were ready to do something about it. And not only did that happen, it set the scene for someone to come in and actually galvanize that anti-Bush crowd. And Obama, yes, generational candidate, but also he did a good job running that campaign. That's why he won. He didn't just win by a slim margin. He demolished John McCain that year. I'm not saying he was a great president either. There were issues, but again, compared to the past. So my hope is that Republicans are so incompetent and another 4 years of Trump are just going to lead to the same awfulness and cruelty and devastation that 4 years from now, who knows where we'll be. It won't be in a good place, but enough people will be ready for a change. And maybe even the people who were like, well, egg prices are high, so who cares about democracy? Those people will be ready to vote against Trump or his replacement as well, right? I hope that's where we go from here. I'm assuming the electorate will make him pay for it. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think we spend so much time here talking about Christian nationalism. I think a lot of people are going to be pissed off when they realize that their lives are going to be dictated by what the most radical white evangelicals want and believe, because the most irrational, delusional voices in that movement are about to be elevated to positions of power. Like, even if they're not in the administration, they are going to be acting like they have the ear of Donald Trump. They will talk about Christianity so much in a nation that's becoming decreasingly Christian. I wanted to show you this. Exit poll that I found interesting. Check this out. And this is an exit poll. They're notoriously unreliable, but it's going to take months before we get more specific data. But check this out. When it came to religion this week, look at what happened here. Actually, I'm going to scroll down for a second. Look at the white evangelical vote. 82. You can see that up here. 82% of white evangelicals backed Donald Trump, it seems. That is a number that is actually slightly higher than in 2016 and 2020, but it's roughly the same. It was always like 80%. 80% of white evangelicals always support Donald Trump. That didn't change this time around. And I mean, what does that tell you about their religion, about their values? They don't have any. They are giving up everything they've ever been taught about Jesus, and they're going with whatever Trump wants. And that's not surprising. But look at up here. This is also interesting. When it came to the nones, the non-religious Americans, the atheists, the agnostics, the people who just don't believe in a higher power, or they believe in something, but they don't define it, 71% of the nones backed Kamala Harris. And the reason that's interesting is because that is actually much higher than the percentage of nones who backed Joe Biden 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I think it was like 65%. Now we're at 71. And you could see in the parentheses there, we are now 24% of the population. A quarter of America has no religious affiliation, and we are overwhelmingly supportive of the Democratic candidate. to the point that we are kind of their base, if you want to parse it that way. Meanwhile, white evangelicals, they make up 22% of voters. There are more of us than there are of them, and we are slowly becoming a bigger base for the Democrats than they are for the Republicans. And I think that's worth keeping an eye on our side. I think that's important for Democrats to remember, because we're not looking for someone who uses the language of faith or who tries to bring people into the fold by using biblical language. We are looking for someone who's going to fight for us and protect our civil rights, our religious freedom, because Republicans are not going to do that. So what else was there to say? If there's other stuff, I'll get to it. I don't have a good answer on how to beat back all the misinformation that we have seen that contributed to the rightward shift of the country, all the misinformation we're about to see over the next few years. I also don't know what could have changed the minds of like half the country that seems immune to reality. I don't know that Kamala Harris could have done any one thing or two things that would have changed the outcome. Maybe you could argue if Biden dropped out earlier, she would have had more time and she would have had to navigate tougher waters in a contested primary. But given the circumstances, I don't know what anyone else could have done. I don't think a different candidate would have pulled this out. So I do want to, I'll try to leave this on a semi-positive note. It is easy to feel cynical about this, that everything you care about is meaningless, that it's all very pointless to be active and to care about this stuff because the people who are ignorant and against you are always going to outnumber you. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. It's not that the debate didn't matter and the, half-filled Trump arenas had no effect. That the endorsement, like Taylor Swift's endorsement, didn't really move the needle, did it? Or all the contributions, the $1 billion plus that Kamala Harris raised, didn't overcome the billionaires backing Donald Trump, or our vibes were better than theirs. It seems like that didn't matter. However, the fact that we have that infrastructure in place and the fact that we can generate that sort of enthusiasm, that is a necessary ingredient to taking back control. What we learned this week is that it's not sufficient. We got to still do more. But if you don't have that level of infrastructure and support, nothing will happen. What I hope happens over the next few years is that the pressure starts to build. That starts, whether it's protests or marches, whether that's building up the democratic infrastructure in your communities so that they can get people elected at a local level where they have a bigger impact on your lives. When Trump does something awful and the Republican Party does something awful, we need to make them pay for it. We need to make sure our best communicators have a way to make sure that gets through to people. I think I read somewhere that a Republican pollster, someone who works with a lot of focus groups, when she asked people if they were concerned about Trump being an autocrat and being that sort of leader, their response was, what the hell is an autocrat? Because that type of language doesn't get through to a lot of people. So when we talk about economic policies, it's not enough to say the stock market is doing well. It has to be, here's how it's going to help you personally at the grocery store. And again, a lot of people know this. It doesn't ever seem to seep into the top levels of the party. I think too many Americans are also nostalgic for a utopia that never existed. They want to go back. They think things were good with Trump. They weren't. They want to go back to some time. I've seen so many people saying Democrats need to stop talking about trans issues. It's like, buddy, I promise you, Kamala Harris spent zero time talking about trans issues. Those are things Trump and the right-wing media do to try to get the spotlight on out groups. They will do commercials about trans people and why they're awful, or they will do commercials about something one activist said and try to make it a huge thing. And then Democrats are left playing defense all the time, even though they are not the ones pushing that stuff. We need to get better at making Republicans pay for their incompetence. I hope we figure that out. Carla asks, how do you think Christian nationalism will affect the LDS Church and Scientology since they have so much cash? I don't think the Trump administration cares about what Mormons are going to do or Scientologists are going to do. They're going to enact the policies they want to based on a very conservative interpretation of the Bible. And if that works for your religion, maybe it won't matter. I don't think the money is the issue here. Policies made at the federal level are going to affect all of us. It's going to affect you in a blue state. It's going to affect you if you have money. Prices are going to be higher even if you have money. So I don't think it's going to affect them that much in a negative way. They're going to be just fine. I'm asking all of you though. I'm asking all of you, and I'm saying this to myself as much as anything else. Please don't just give up. Don't tune out as hard as it is like this week. Progress is never smooth. Other people before us have been through worse, and they've been through it for a longer amount of time, and they kept fighting, whether it's the civil rights movement, whichever type of civil rights movement you want to talk about, women's rights. They had to fight through a lot worse, and they got through it. Why? Because they kept pushing. They kept bringing new people in to do the work with them. It requires that sort of constant vigilance. And I say this as someone who was demoralized in 2004 and demoralized in 2016. And I'm demoralized. I feel more than ever now. But there is a way to get through it. It's okay to take some time out from all of this. Get your mind away from the elections and the news right now. But soon, find a local group you can join. Find some candidates you really support who really match what you believe. Work with them. Work for them. Help them out so they can get elected, because I think that fight's going to be even more fierce next time around. This question is, do you think they're going to try and declare that America is a Christian nation? I don't think they're going to pass a law or proclamation saying that. I think that would be almost too dumb even for them. But I think what they will do is they will do a lot of things that are awful, and they are going to justify it by saying things like, this has to do with our Judeo-Christian history. They'll work it into the conversation as if this is part of who we are as a country. And then all of us will be like, that's not actual history. If you learned history, which I know the Trump people don't want people to do, you would know that. But I don't think they're going to pass a law saying we're officially a Christian nation. That's too blunt. They will just try to insinuate that. Who knows? The Supreme Court might say we're going to undo marriage equality. Why? Because our Judeo-Christian history says marriage is between a man and a woman. We're going to leave anything else to the states. I mean, they could do that. I don't think they will be as blunt as declaring it a Christian nation. They'll do a lot of things leading up to that, but they won't go that far. Other questions about this? The people that voted for Trump, in my opinion, do not live in reality. But the actual reality of it is that they believe they were making things better because they were allowed to live in tribal something. I agree with you. I don't think they live in reality. I think they're susceptible to a lot of misinformation. They really are frustrated with the way things are going because, again, whatever good news we could talk about, the United States did better economically post-pandemic than I think any other country in the world. What does that mean for you personally? Sorry, not everything affects you personally. The price of everything could be much worse, but it's not, because we're actually doing better than everyone else. But if you don't pay attention to that stuff, you just say, well, gas is higher than it was 4 years ago during the pandemic when no one was traveling anywhere. Who should I blame for that? Let me blame whoever's in charge, which is a horribly dumb, short-sighted way to think about it, but that is how people think. So I wish Democrats would get better at selling themselves as the solutions, because by and large, federally, they have been. I read Jesus and John Wayne. Their values are white patriarchy and hierarchy. Yeah, it's a great book by Kristen Dumais. This is what the right has become. They value this idea that men are in charge, white men specifically, that women are the helpmeets, that their job is to give birth. Doesn't matter. No exceptions to the rule. You got pregnancy complications. No one cares. Just you give birth. And that also implies that I got to look up to my pastor to look over me. I got to look to a president who talks like an authoritarian and a strongman to look after me. I need someone to babysit me and tell me it's going to be okay. They love that stuff. Yeah, Jesus and John Wayne is not the first book to lay that out, but it's true. I mean, that's what evangelical churches teach too. The guy on stage, the one in charge, is the one you trust. And if that guy tells you how to vote, that's how you vote. You don't get a mind of your own. And within the family, you listen to the husband. Why do you think they got so mad at those ads that had like Julia Roberts narrating and women saying, you can vote secretly for whoever you want. Your husband doesn't have to know. I mean, I don't think a lot of women were doing that, frankly, but the idea of it suggests that, hey, you don't have to live in a patriarchal home. And I think that offended a lot of right-wing men, too. Other questions here. I'm a single male atheist living in Colorado that doesn't plan on marrying or having kids. How worried should I be if Project 2025 becomes a reality? Here's why I think people need to care, even if they're not affected by abortion or children, or directly, I should say, by those things. Among the things in Project 2025, what they want to do, they want to drastically alter the nature of public schools, whether it's posting 10 commandments inside every building or taking money away from your public schools and giving them to private schools. Like, I don't think Republicans realize how mad parents are when some of those small right-wing groups in their communities try to get books banned. A lot of parents hate that. You go after public schools and the public school system, you are now affecting people who might otherwise stay out of government or stay out of politics as a news thing. Like, they may not pay attention, but you go after their kids, you go after their schools, they're going to come after you. But that is what Project 2025 talks about. And that is something as a society we should be concerned about, how Republicans want to destroy public schools. What else should you be concerned about? The way they're going to change the nature of judicial appointments. Like, white Christian male is going to be the default for a lot of positions, and that sets a bad precedent for everything. I don't know what's going to affect you personally, but I think when things affect your community and the people you love, that matters too, right? And Project 2025 is all about pushing a certain specific narrow vision of what the country should be like on everybody. And if you're not part of their club, you're not just ignored, you're punished for it. And that's disturbing as well. Like, they want a biblically based definition of marriage and religion. Here's another example. The Department of Health and Human Services, they say this in Project 2025. There was a question about, should we shut down churches as gathering places in the event of another pandemic? And obviously, when the pandemic was going on in 2020, we couldn't have large gatherings, especially where people were going to gather in one room without masks, without social distancing, and sing and talk like churches. Like, that was bad. So they shut down, a lot of states shut down big public gatherings. And then the religious right got so mad about that, they acted like that was an affront to them personally. Like, the government was trying to shut down churches, which is BS. But Project 2025 actually says, in the event of another pandemic, we're going to make sure you cannot shut down churches and you cannot enforce a mask mandate or mandate vaccinations at a federal level. Like, that's the sort of thing where I don't care if you don't think Project 2025 will affect you. If there's another pandemic, that's going to get to you whether you like it or not. And you're going to want to have competent, science-driven people in charge in a situation like that. Project 2025 would get rid of all of that. If not like a specific policy, we know who they're going to elevate to those positions where you get to talk about that. There will be no more Anthony Fauci's. It'll be people like RFK Jr. or Joseph Ladapo in Florida, people who have made a career out of spreading BS. And that should scare everybody. I work in construction in Montana, and on Wednesday, everyone was talking about liberation. I'm fucking tired. Hey, I hear you. You know, Montana's interesting because my understanding is in the state, they actually they shifted more to the left as a state. Like, they elected more Democrats to the state House and the state Senate than they've ever done in any year. They did that this week, even though the state is overwhelmingly red when it comes to federal elections. But yeah, this is the thing. The people who are excited about liberation, obviously they have no clue what they're talking about. The question is, how do you get that message through to them? And maybe it takes someone like you who works with them and knows them to work that into your conversations, how the things they think they want are not the things they want, I don't know what the best way to reach them is. Because if they're getting misinformation, we need better sources of information. If they're not paying attention to anything, then it'll take people close to them to convince them it's wrong. My fear is they're going to find out the hard way, whatever way that is, that this is not about liberation. They're not going to get more free speech. They're not going to get higher paychecks or a better pension or a better union job. It's not going to happen because Trump is in charge. And if they don't know that, I mean, do they want to learn about it? What are you going to do to help them understand it? That falls on all of us to try to fix. All right. Well, thank you for that. I know it's a lot of talking. Like I said, a lot of this is me venting because I don't have anyone else to talk to about this, and I want to get this out as well. So I'm going to move to a different story, but I'm sure we'll come back to election rants in a little bit. Give me a second to pull this up here. Okay. Just want to double check one thing. All right. Speaking of Project 2025, the guy who runs the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts was involved in Project 2025. He actually wrote the foreword to that book. That's how involved he is with Project 2025. And last week, he held something called a virtual faith media roundtable. So he's talking like on Zoom to a bunch of religious Christian leaders. And I wanted to point out one of the things he said, because this is an example of the lies that the right spreads on the left. He said that if Kamala Harris got elected, she would take away Christians' right to worship. This is from the Christian Post, but check out this. Check out this. Roberts described Kamala Harris as the most anti-faith, anti-religion presidential candidate in history. He maintained that people of faith who are worried about the choice they are making really need to understand what's at stake. We're going to lose our ability to worship. We're going to lose our religious liberty if the Harris-Walz campaign prevails. I'm going to get to that last bit in a second. What the hell is this guy talking about? How is she anti-faith, anti-religion? None of that is true. Why the hell would you think she's going to shut down churches? Nothing she has ever said says she would do that or wants to do that or even would consider it. Never. There's no legal mechanism that would allow that to happen. And by the way, church-state separation groups would be at the front of the line saying you can't do that. And by the way, these same people said the same thing about Joe Biden. They said the same thing about Barack Obama. But look at this next thing he said. Where is he getting this information from? He said he cited the vice president's suggestion to attendees at one of her recent rallies who shouted phrases including "Christ is King," that they were at the wrong rally as an example of her hostility to religion. What the hell is he talking about? Let me tell you. You may have seen this online in the news somewhere that a couple of weeks ago, Harris did a rally, and in the middle of her speech, there were protesters, which is not weird. There have been progressive protesters about Gaza. There have been MAGA people protesting because they don't like listening to women. Well, anyway, I'm sure from her vantage point, she saw these protesters, and they were maybe wearing MAGA hats or something like that. And she said to them, "Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally. I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street," which is a great line. And it got a lot of laughs in the arena. And it also got shared a lot on social media because she's going after the thing that hurts Trump the most, his ego, right? Well, apparently after the fact, the Christian media pointed out that those protesters, I'm sure she couldn't hear them from where she was at, but they were yelling things like "Christ is King," which means the way they were spinning this is that those protesters were yelling about Jesus, and Kamala Harris yells back, "Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally. I think you meant to go over there." Like, that's not at all what happened. That's not even what the initial reporting said. That's just the narrative the right ran with to paint Kamala Harris as anti-Christian, which is ridiculous because she's Baptist and her husband is Jewish and her running mate is Lutheran, and she discusses her faith all the time on the campaign trail, and she had all these religious leaders vouching for and pushing for her presidency. Like, there's nothing about her that is anti-Christian. I promise you she is not showing up at atheist meetings of any kind. But for guys like Kevin Roberts, only a certain type of Christian ever counts. Everyone else is anti-Christian and evil. This guy also, same dude, he was talking about Donald Trump. And you might think he would say, Donald Trump isn't perfect. He's not like Jesus, but we're still going to support him. No, this is what he said about the other side. Roberts lamented that there are people of faith who are sitting on the sidelines because they have forgotten that we are electing a president, not a pastor. He contended that Christians who plan on sitting out this election because of their concerns about Trump need to remember that none of us is perfect, including Trump and Vance. Again, this goes right back to what I was saying earlier about the double standards. No one is suggesting Trump and Vance are perfect. There are no standards for them whatsoever. Like, what do you mean none of us is perfect? They're not even barely competent, and yet they're acting like Kamala Harris needs to be absolutely perfect. That's ridiculous. He also says we're electing a president, not a pastor, as if to discredit what? Like, we know no one's perfect, but like, what are they dismissing about Donald Trump? It's the racism, the rape allegations, the criminal charges, the 36 counts, that he was indicted for, the 2 impeachments. Like, that is so far from, well, don't worry about it. We're not electing a pastor. We're electing a president. Dude, have you seen what pastors are up to lately? Those guys aren't great either. But that is not what they said when it was like Barack Obama, who was pretty much scandal free. That's definitely not what they said about Bill Clinton. At that point, the president had to set a moral example for the entire country. And guys like Kevin Roberts were the ones leading that charge. We can't have Bill Clinton in office. He's immoral. And now it's Donald Trump. And they're like, well, who cares about a president's morality? Since when did that stuff ever matter? One of the things this guy wrote in Project 2025 is that if conservatives want to save the country, we need a bold and courageous plan. This book is the first step in that plan. And that's why he was pushing for Donald Trump, because if Trump got elected, then that plan could be in effect. If Kamala Harris won, then the plan would be destroyed, or it'd become Project 2029. And now, instead of explaining to anybody why Trump is worth supporting, he was telling his supporters why you should vote for Donald Trump because Kamala Harris hates Christians and she wants to shut down your churches. Because when you're a Christian leader, you always think it's okay to lie in the name of Jesus. All lies are okay if it goes back to getting the power you want. That is what their faith has become. Which is weird because Joe Biden's like the most religious president we've had in a really long time. And just like Joe Biden, Kevin Roberts is actually a conservative Catholic. Biden's Catholic, obviously, not conservative. Roberts is also a Catholic. And yet Project 2025 said the Biden administration has been hostile to people of faith, especially those with traditional beliefs about marriage, gender, and sexuality, which is a really weird thing to say, because if I told you, yeah, you got to protect my traditional religious views when it comes to race, I think everyone would know, oh, no, we don't want to defend that at all. That's disgusting, your traditional views on race. And yet when they're like, we just want to protect our traditional views on marriage, it's like, oh, what exactly does that mean for you? Oh, right. It means you want to like break up all gay couples. You don't think they should be allowed to be together. What are your traditional views about gender? It's that trans people don't exist and the woman is nothing more than just a helpmeet for the husband. Just say that out loud. Don't couch it in this language. So, like, look, even if Kamala Harris won, Christianity would have been doing just fine. Somehow Christianity survived the Obama years. I don't know how, but they did. And now they're going to have more power than ever before. And they're going to be able to enact their faith-based bigotry in so many different ways because this guy is now, he got exactly what he wanted. How did he do it? He did it by lying about Kamala Harris. And he's not the first. He won't be the last to say that about Democrats. But this is their playbook now. They will just lie about Democrats treat them as enemies of religion, no matter how much outreach to religious groups Democrats do. Just another thing I find infuriating, and I don't know why they're allowed to get away with it. You will never hear a Democrat say, man, that other side, they're hostile to Jews, they're hostile to Muslims, and they can't get away with it. But when Republicans say Democrats are anti-Christian and they want to shut down our churches, they're just allowed to say that, and all these people just believe it and spread it. Okay, I'm going to stop there for that story. What questions do we have? Hey, I know y'all might be understandably stressed and worried. Just know you're not alone. There's a Discord. Community helps. There is a Discord for Friendly Atheist. Den, maybe you could find that on my friendly. Thank you. There we go. There's the Discord link if you want that. Thank you for that donation, by the way. I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, I hope you know this. I've heard a couple anecdotal, scary stories about people reacting to the election in really horrific ways. Don't worry about that. You will find solidarity there. You are going to find that there are so many people who are right there with you and pushing back against this stuff. And the more Republicans overreach and the more they try to butt into everyone's lives, the bigger the reaction is going to be. And I hope all of you and myself, I hope we're all a part of that, pushing back, not giving them any ground they have not earned. Thank you, Cabby. I may appear to be arguing against you, but what I say, but I'm here 100% because I appreciate what you do. Don't know who you're arguing with. Maybe it was someone in the comments, but I appreciate that. And again, this is the thing I think is important. Why isn't there like a liberal Joe Rogan? Because we are a big tent. We have to be. There's nowhere else for anyone to go. So there are so many disagreements among Democrats. We've seen it in the wake of the election where they're snipping at each other about what should have been done during the campaign. The Republican Party's problem is incompetence. It's not that they don't share the one brain cell and pass it around amongst each other. It's that they're just bad at governing. So there are going to be a lot of disagreements among Democrats about how to move forward. You won't see those policy debates in Republican circles because they don't care about policy. Someone's just going to tell them what to do. They're going to go along with it because they're not interested in hashing out good ideas. It's just not a feature of their party. So listen, argue all you want. Do it in good faith. Please listen to what the other side is saying, but then, have a good, reasoned debate. Evangelicals mix religious beliefs into their political identity. They're convinced they're the people who are correct and fighting for righteousness. They don't think they're bad. That's the irony. It is one of the hallmarks of the Trump era and the past several years of politics that what does it even mean to be an evangelical anymore? There used to be like a small list of like, you have to believe in the resurrection of Jesus. You have to believe that you can be born again, things like that. Like, if you believe those things, you're an evangelical. And these days, that clearly isn't what is binding all those people together. What binds them together is that they're moved by Donald Trump and their churches are arms of the GOP. That is a bigger glue. They use the language of faith to do it, but it's just like the MAGA cult, except religious edition. That's what they're bound together by. So it is interesting. Like, yeah, they have mixed religious beliefs into their political identity, but I would argue that white evangelicals, and specifically white, because black Christians are not part of the problem here. White evangelicals are very much, what they have in common is politics. It is not interpretation of what Jesus said. It is politics, which is really interesting because white evangelical is more of a political label then, as opposed to a religious one, which is a big change moving forward. Any other questions here? All right, you could sign up right there for the newsletter. I'm going to jump to a different story. All right, let's talk. Let me pull this up here, get rid of some stuff. Actually, I'm going to get some liquid as well. I hope the internet is working now. All right, I wanted to... Oh, thanks, Alan. I wanted to talk about this. I know it feels like it's late because it's post-election, but I think this is important moving forward. When Florida began early voting about a month ago, there was a rally in Florida to try to get people to vote against Amendment 4. And Amendment 4 was a ballot measure that would have enshrined abortion rights into the Florida Constitution. It would undo the state's 6-week abortion ban. And so Republicans did not want people voting for Amendment 4. And so to that end, Ron DeSantis, the governor, and the lieutenant governor, Jeanette Nunez, they were at an event with a bunch of people cosplaying as doctors, wearing their suits, their white jackets, and all that stuff. And they were urging people not to vote for that amendment. That event even closed with a prayer by the Miami Archbishop, Thomas Wensky. But I wanted to play for you a clip of what Nunez, the lieutenant governor of Florida, said at that rally, because while most of it's just, don't vote for the abortion measure, there was one aspect of it that infuriated me, and I wanted to share that with you and then talk about it. So let me play the clip, and then we'll talk.
And I believe that those of us that prescribe to our faith have a special responsibility to stand up for what is right, to protect life. We are right next door to St. Teresa, one of the most iconic churches in Miami-Dade County. And just yesterday, thousands of people walked through that door and through the doors of churches all around our state to pray, to worship, to hear the word of God. And while I know that one of our doctors said this isn't a religious amendment, here's what I will say. We cannot go to church and pray like Christians and turn around and vote like atheists.
Don't vote like atheists. Like she said it like it was a bad thing to do. She said it like it was a slur with her Michelle Bachmann eyes. Like, here's the thing. We know what she was saying. She's saying religious people who support abortion rights are turning their backs on God. And it was wrong to support whatever she called abortion extremism. Like, you were an atheist if you voted otherwise, and you don't want to be an atheist now, do you? And I'm not surprised to hear that coming from a Republican, but I think it's thoughtless to the point that we need to talk about that because it doesn't make any sense. When she's condemning voting like atheists, she is telling everyone that we should not listen to the horror stories from women who have been unable to get the health care they need in states where post-Dobbs laws have endangered their lives, or in some cases have killed them. Apparently, we're supposed to just turn our heads and look the other way. That voting like an atheist means it would be wrong to consider how Florida's laws ban the procedure before many women even know they are pregnant. That it's wrong to allow a woman and a doctor to decide what should happen to her body, and that Florida Republicans are inherently better suited to make that decision for her. That's what she's trying to tell people would be evil to do. Americans United for Separation of Church and States, Rob Boston, put it this way. That line demonizes people who don't believe in God by implying that there's something wrong with the way they vote. And she's trying to make religious people feel really guilty about their choices and supporting this amendment, even though surveys have repeatedly shown Christians are not monolithic on this issue. Check this out. This is from the Pew Research Center. And I think this is from 2022 after the Dobbs decision. This is fascinating. Among the adults, this is a survey of adults who said abortion should be legal in all cases with no exceptions. And up here, you have abortion should be illegal in all cases, no exceptions. And you could see in that top line, like among white evangelicals, 78% of white Protestants. I'm sorry, I'm going to go up a line. 72% of white evangelicals said there are some cases where abortion should be legal. Even among white evangelicals, they're like, yeah, I don't think we should make it illegal always. There are some situations when maybe it's warranted. Maybe it's a risky pregnancy, an ectopic pregnancy. Maybe the mother's life is in danger. Maybe someone was the victim of sexual assault. Whatever it is, there are some cases when an abortion might be okay, even to the most anti-abortion people in the country. So even when you think about it that way, there are plenty of conservative Christians who don't want extreme abortion bans. By the way, a different survey found that 97%, actually, it might be this one, right? Let me go back to this. I'm going to remove me from here. Look at that very bottom line. Among the religiously unaffiliated, 98% right there, is it? 97% of the religiously unaffiliated say abortion should be legal in all cases or most cases, or it should be legal in some situations. Like, we support abortion rights at least minimally. Only 2% want it banned for completely. And look at what it is for the other groups. Like, 56% of Catholics say abortion should be legal in at least some circumstances. The Catholic Church says it's wrong in all circumstances. But actual Catholics are like, most of them say, yeah, my church is wrong on this. And among white evangelicals, you could see the number. Like, there are a significant number of religious people who support abortion rights in some cases. Voting like atheists doesn't mean supporting abortion rights in every situation either, but like, that nuance is lost on her. So anyway, back to the point I wanted to make. If Florida's Amendment 4 passed, it would have only happened because Floridians of all religious backgrounds and people of no religious faith opposed anti-abortion extremism. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, 57% of Floridians said, we don't want this extreme abortion ban. But because the threshold was 60%, the 6-week ban is still in effect. Florida is now a very dangerous state to live in if you're a young woman, if you're a woman who may be able to get pregnant, because if you have a risky pregnancy, if you're the victim of assault or anything like that, or you just need an abortion, you won't be able to get it unless you fly out of the state or have the money to get transportation out of it. The Freedom from Religion Foundation sent a letter to Nunez's office. And I appreciate them pushing back on this, even though I don't think she cares. They mentioned the survey results I brought up here. Your remarks not only show an unseemly hostility to millions of good tax-paying Americans who are atheists, but reveal you're not up to date with current surveys on approval of abortion rights by Americans of diverse faiths. And I appreciate that they say that. And they go on to say one more thing right here I liked. While your remarks were intended to denigrate atheists and promote your own Christian beliefs, in fact, we would suggest that our country would be a whole lot better off if more people voted like an atheist. Voting like an atheist means supporting the constitutional principle of separation between church and state and church, understanding the science of climate change, championing individual rights and personal freedoms, including the right to abortion care, and preserving our democracy against Christian nationalists who want to impose their religion on everyone else. And you would think in Florida, they have a vested interest in the harm caused by climate change. But again, they're not paying attention to any of that stuff. I mean, I think voting like an atheist, if you think about it, in short, it means thinking about the impact that your decisions are going to have on the people around you and around the world, right? You're trying to create a more just world for everybody, regardless of their personal beliefs. And you respect expertise where it is warranted. And the project of Republicans over the past couple of decades has been ignoring experts, dismantling any system that relies on expertise. The Supreme Court's done this as well. And not thinking long-term at all. Like, Trump's whole thing is we're going to drill for oil everywhere because there might be short-term gains to it. Granted, the Biden administration did more drilling than anyone else. Doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. But Donald Trump is saying, let's drill. Is that bad for the environment? He doesn't care, because they don't care what happens in 20, 30 years. They all think, or the powerful ones among them, think Jesus is going to come rescue them in 5 minutes anyway. So they have no ability to care to think about the long term. I mean, the fact that, I wanted to point this out too. The fact that Florida's lieutenant governor could just trash an entire subgroup of people, don't vote like an atheist. It's just another example of Christian privilege. Can you imagine if Tim Walz on the campaign trail urged people, hey, don't vote like Christians. Don't vote like evangelicals. What would the reaction have been if that happened? But again, because Republicans are held to no standards whatsoever by anybody, they can do that sort of slander and get away with it every time. Partly because we're an easy group to punch down at, and partly because no one's holding Republicans accountable for anything they say. I mean, I appreciate what Americans United's Rob Boston said. Tarring an entire class of people for what they believe or don't believe about God is crude and offensive. Right? That describes her completely. And I don't know. I feel like I did not realize before this week. Wait, Ron DeSantis I knew was bad. I didn't realize his lieutenant governor was like equally awful about everything. Who knew? All right, we could take questions here. I've taken to calling people like that devil worshippers. I even pulled out the dusty Christian hat and tossed out a few relevant Bible verses. Who are we talking about? Are the devil worshippers? And you say that like it matters to us. It obviously doesn't. I don't care what people believe. But it does amuse me that if you go after these people in any sort of way, they're going to accuse you of like discriminating against them. Meanwhile, they just say the nastiest thing about every group that's not them, and they just get away with it every time. Voting like an atheist is more human. It's more humane. It's more humanistic. It's all of that. Yeah, like I don't know why anyone would think that's a bad thing. Why don't you vote like you got to think about the future because no one's going to be here to rescue us other than us? I think that's a pretty good way to cast your vote and think about who you're going to support in any election. Like we could use more religious people voting like atheists in that regard. Oh, thank you for that donation. I appreciate that, B. All right. Yeah, like and subscribe. Support that. I'm going to jump to a different story here. I'm debating with this story. Should I give away the ending right now? We'll see. Okay. Let me bring this up. So I want to introduce you to this guy right here. His name is Jason Yates. And until very recently, he was the CEO of a group called My Faith Votes. Okay, and what is My Faith Votes? It is a nonprofit organization that their goal, I'm going to share this with you. This is their website. It's a nonpartisan group that motivates, equips, and activates Christians in America to vote in every election, transforming our communities and influencing our nation with biblical truth. And actually, if you go down on their website, look at what they say about why we exist. Secular progressives have actively sought to implement a counterfeit worldview at every level of government. Christians have remained quietly inside the walls of the church, which is BS. When have Christians ever been quiet about anything? I don't know. As a result of apathy at the voting booth and in public life, we've suffered devastating moral decay, declining religious freedom, immoral national debt, and the erosion of traditional family values. And that is why they support the guy who's had 3 different wives and 5 kids with them and would balloon the national debt and is nothing but a walking example of moral decay. But again, the idea here is they're blaming secular progressives for everything wrong with the world. And they're saying we're suffering moral decay and traditional family values have been lost because too many people like atheists have been in charge of everything, which is news to me because we are not in charge of anything. That group's honorary chairman is Mike Huckabee. So, I mean, this is the sort of group this dude, Jason Yates, was running. And this past summer, I'm going to show you this as well. This is in the conservative Washington Times. But there was an interesting article. This is a conservative news outlet. But our children are being programmed to believe sexually deviant behavior. And let's look at this right here. He tells a story. You could see his name there in the byline by Jason Yates and My Faith Votes. He said this past July, he was talking about his son Levi, who's in middle school and part of a robotics team. And they went to the University of Minnesota for a robotics competition. Fine. Good for him. All that's fine. But then look at this. As we walked into the arena at the University of Minnesota, we were greeted by something far different from what you would expect. We were immediately confronted with posters encouraging children to embrace strange new sexual horizons. They were handing out literature with an agenda to teach him to doubt the link between his mind and body, his self and his self-image. They offered Levi a rainbow button to wear, encouraging him to declare his gender preferences. Wasn't this supposed to be a robotics competition? What the hell is this guy mad about? I don't know if this had anything to do with the robotics competition or because it was held at the University of Minnesota, there were college students who were just handing out, rainbow buttons or like name tags that might have said, tell us what your pronouns are or something like that. And this guy is treating that as they're trying to get my kid to embrace strange new sexual horizons and they're trying to confuse him. Like, dude, if you don't want the button, throw it away like the rest of us do and move on with your life. But this is the sort of dude Jason Yates is. He's the sort of person who flips out over the sight of a rainbow flag because that's apparently bad for children, right? He sees Pride merch and he flips out and he thinks gay people are trying to recruit my son because these people are still weird, even if Tim Walz is no longer running for anything. Anyway, anytime Christians try to pretend their morality and their religion are linked together and that anyone outside that Venn diagram is inherently immoral, you all know how the story turns out, right? You know where I'm going with this, yes? You know what happened to Jason Yates, because I promise you, whatever you think just happened to Jason Yates, it is so much worse than whatever you were thinking. I'm gonna pull up something from a website called Ministry Watch, which focuses on this sort of stuff. But here is the headline. I'll just read it to you straight. It's disturbing. Jason C. Yates, the former CEO of My Faith Votes, has been charged with 8 felony counts of possession of that phrase I'm not going to say because I don't want YouTube to be mad at me. Each of the 8 charges filed in McLeod County, Minnesota, carry a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison and a fine of $10,000. That means this guy faces 80 years behind bars right now. They note that Yates has a prior conviction and is a registered predatory offender. So, not only has this guy been arrested for possession of stuff he definitely should not have, this is apparently not the first time he's been convicted of this stuff. He is already a registered predatory child sex offender. This is how is this the first time we're learning about this? That's very disturbing, right? And so that prior conviction also had to do with the same sort of material. But according to news reports, that prior conviction was tossed out for reasons I could not figure out. That's why it was unreported, really. But in any case, if you look at the court records, and this is what like these websites are posting, there are court records of what happened to this guy. It's really disturbing because this is what the law enforcement officials basically told the judge, like, we need to arrest this guy. And I mean, I'm not going to read all of this because it's just troubling, but just look at the charge. Count 1, possession of adult material involving minors under 14. And they have count after count of stuff like this that's just more and more disturbing. This is where the 8 counts are coming from. These are all separate incidents. And then they get into like why we think it's this guy. And I'm not going to read all that. That's a bit of word salad. But the story that the court documents revealed are actually devastating. Here's my best attempt at summarizing what happened here. Some relative was in Jason Yates's home office and they needed a way to store some files. So they were looking around for like a flash drive or something, and they came across a portable hard drive in Yates's dresser. So they plugged it into their own computer, and when they were looking through it to see if there was storage available, they realized there are 100 sexually explicit images of children. Very disturbing. So this person's like, oh my God, I wasn't supposed to see that. What the hell do I do? This person calls up a trusted friend And the friend's like, you need to turn that over to law enforcement. And that's what happened. The hard drive was turned over to law enforcement. And in this court document, it goes into detail about what the hard drive had on it. And listen, I read some of the descriptions in the legal document. I'm traumatized. I'm doubly traumatized from this week, and I was already not doing well. I think the most disturbing thing I learned from those documents and those descriptions is that the victims were allegedly between the ages of 5 and 7. That is something they mention repeatedly because they go into depth about what the videos, the pictures were. Very disturbing. So his next court date's going to be in January. And until then, this guy is forbidden from having any contact with anyone under the age of 18. He's just not allowed to be around them at all. I also wonder, when I was reading that Washington Times article he wrote about his kids' robotics competition, there was this nugget of information that I found pretty disturbing. Let me share this with you. This is in his bio at the bottom of the article. Jason serves on several national mission boards, coaches his daughter's lacrosse team, and is an elder at his church. This guy coaches a girls' lacrosse team. I'm scared to ask the follow-up question. So when Religion News Service, oh, by the way, I got to show you this. I went to go find that same article I just showed you about the robotics competition, and I went to the original URL for the Washington Times where I saw the article the first time. This is what it says now. Editor's note. This content has been removed. And let's look at the editor's note. The Washington Times has removed the content of this article after the author's arrest on 8 counts of possession of that material. Like, really? Why are you removing it? Why? Did you not? I don't know why they had to remove it. He wasn't talking about that stuff directly. I think they're just ashamed to be associated with this guy, right? I also wanted to share with you, I wanted to pull this up. The Religion News Service, they actually reached out to My Faith Votes to ask about this dude. And this is the statement they got. Like, hey, what's up with your CEO and his arrest? In early August 2024, the My Faith Votes Board of Directors separated Jason Yates from My Faith Votes, and board member someone else assumed the position of acting CEO. And notice how quickly they pivot here. Over the last 3 months, Chris has been working with a dedicated My Faith Votes team to encourage millions of Christians to vote, pray, and think biblically about this election in America, so we can all vote for another sex predator in the name of Jesus. They did not say that. But it is weird that they're just like, haha, why are you asking us about that dude? We separated from that guy a month ago for no reason. Did we not do any background checks? Did no one have any clue this was going on? That's weird. I feel like if this was an atheist organization where the director was charged with these awful crimes and the organization responded like, well, I don't know why you're talking to us. We got rid of him 3 weeks ago. So whatever, don't be mad at us. I feel like Christians would make a bigger deal of it. But anyway, they had nothing to say. The organization had nothing to say about how they treat secular progressives as moral degenerates. Meanwhile, they were run by a guy who was hoarding illicit content involving children. No statement about the hypocrisy that you have to believe to allow that to happen. By the way, they also pointed out in the Religion News Service article that on the Monday of Yates's hearing in court this week, My Faith Votes held an online pre-election prayer event, urging listeners to vote for candidates who support Christian values, which I would think either means Kamala Harris or nobody, because nobody's perfect. But no, somehow that meant supporting the least Christian dude in the world. The guy who just goes against every single thing pastors love to say Jesus taught. They were praying for that guy while their former CEO was in court for the worst reasons. Like, at what point will any of these groups reckon with the fact that the biggest threats to children are often in positions of power within religious organizations? Like, I'm not worried about drag queens reading books to kids in libraries. I'm worried about the youth group director who got his job without any sort of vetting or background checks, and he's doing whatever the hell he wants to do with those kids. That's what we should be worried about. That's what they should be worried about. But they don't care. Now that they've been caught, they just want the story to go away. They're not going to wrestle with any of the facts of the case. Okay, I'm done with that story. Disturbing stuff. What questions we got here? I'm sadly not even surprised about sexual assault from religious leaders any longer. I know my podcast co-host pointed out, like, she'll sometimes send me stories about people like this doing awful things, getting arrested for these reasons. And I told her at one point, hey, I can't cover this. There are dozens of these stories every week. And by and large, I kind of have to put them aside unless I think it's a bigger story or there's a bigger picture, bigger conversation to be had about it. I can't cover every priest who does something criminal. There are just too many of them. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by the depth of the crime. I fully expect it to happen. And I think people who attend churches, their default should be that I am not going to trust the religious leaders in charge here. They have to earn my trust. And until they do that, I'm not going to give it to them, because there are just too many stories of people behaving badly when they have access to children because they are considered people of faith. What other questions we got? My kid just said, if that's what you call moral, I'll gladly be an amoral heathen. Nice job, kid. You are someone who's probably voting like an atheist, which I was told by the Florida lieutenant governor was a very, very horrible thing. Oh, thanks, Gabby. I'm an atheist, but for me to be okay with describing myself as that, I need to know that my time and effort are not used in an us versus them fight, which is really hard to do if you feel like you are one of us, but is important. Just trying to parse that. I am, like you're saying, you are an atheist, but if you want to be proud of that label, if you want to use that in any meaningful way, I will just tell you that the atheist organizations I tend to support personally and just communicate with on a regular basis, they are very much, even American atheists, which you would think is carrying the flag for the atheist label, they're very much not like an us versus them fight. They will ally with religious groups as long as we're working for church state separation. I have actually seen, and for good reason, we are not fighting against religious groups. I'm sure there are individuals who are like, burn it all to the ground. Like, I'm sure there are some subreddits where they would do that. But by and large, a lot of the atheist organizations, a lot of the people you might see on YouTube who are atheists with a large following, their enemies, so to speak, are not people of religious faith. Those people are wrong. We could discuss why they're wrong, but they're not the enemy. The question is, who are people doing evil things because of their beliefs? I'm going to put my focus on them. And if religious people who dislike that want to ally with me to push back against it, just like we saw with Evangelicals for Harris during this campaign season, great, let's work together because we share this goal. And later on, when we're having drinks together, we can argue about religion, So I don't think there was a lot of us versus them fighting going on, especially in terms of the organized atheist movement, which is a small group, but it exists. But also, even personally, a lot of the atheists I know who do YouTube and podcasting and everything, it's really not a we're right, everyone else is wrong, screw them all. We think we're right. But again, it doesn't mean you have to treat everyone else like the enemy. So, my 2 cents. Should also mention that the us versus them paradigm is beloved by folks who have no friends because they suck. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing I didn't like about the Trump campaign and the people supporting him, where they just treated everyone who's not them as the enemy. Whether it was their jokes or just their rhetoric, it's like, if you're not with us, we have to destroy you. And that's why, I mean, it's so disturbing that they were able to get away with that. Thank you for that, Julia. I appreciate it. Any other questions or thoughts here? You should sell Vote Like an Atheist merch. I was about to say, like, I'm pretty sure now is the worst time to sell Vote Like an Atheist merch. But yeah, we should all consider that like before the next midterms. Though I hope you are voting for local elections before then, because there will be a bunch of that too. Yeah, please sign up for the newsletter. I would appreciate it. I got a couple more quick ones for you here before I finish. Let me get to this story right here. This should be short, but like I saw this and it just bugged the hell out of me. There is a guy named Brian Drake who is like a magician. He's an illusionist. And his whole thing is he performs like at school assemblies. The idea, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you can get a job doing what you love, more power to you. But this guy basically markets himself as a guy who can go to your school, do a performance, uh, give kids a good message while he's doing the performance. You know, I'm sure you all went to assemblies like that when you went to school. Like, here's someone talking about why you shouldn't do drugs, and they're really funny, or they're acrobats, or they're doing something to get your attention. And then in the process, they tell you why you shouldn't do that one really bad thing. So that's what this guy is, Brian Drake. And if the problem is, if you go to his website, he's very clear about the message he wants to send. All right. So he and his wife are the act. And it says here, the Brian Drake Show is driven by one clear and overriding passion to share the gospel with this generation. Brian and Carla Drake have performed for hundreds of thousands of people over the past 10 years. They have witnessed the amazing grace of God firsthand, as thousands of people at their shows have surrendered their lives to follow Jesus. Which, by the way, that last phrase, that would be disturbing if it was in any context outside of religion, but I think we're just used to it because it is about Jesus. But don't say all these people that come to my shows have surrendered their lives to this thing I care about. It's a creepy ass thing to say. Now, look, there are so many churches out there, and I've heard this from, you know, people like Taylor Tomlinson and stuff like that. If you're, let's say, a stand-up comedian, you can actually make a living if you're a good comedian on the church circuit. So you get paid by churches to entertain the crowd, and the church can say, hey, we have a comedian. It's a fundraiser. Give us money to come to the door. That allows us to pay the performer. And also it's a fundraiser for the church. And like, they can get away with doing this. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what this guy does as well. He performs for schools, but he also performs for churches. So this is not weird. This has been happening for a really long time. People like him. Nothing wrong with any of that. The thing that I wanted to bring up is, why did a high school in South Carolina invite this guy to perform? Because recently Brian Drake was invited to do his show at Socastee High School in the city of Conway, South Carolina. And the reason I say that is, even if this guy did a secular presentation, the public school officials had to know this guy is a Christian first and an illusionist second, right? Like, if you look online, there are pictures of this guy performing. Check this out right here. Like, here he is performing at a public high school. This is not the same one that I was just referring to, but he does shows at high schools. But if you go to his website, he makes clear what he's all about. I don't get it. So the Freedom from Religion Foundation heard that this show was about to happen. So they sent a letter to the school district saying, hey, we heard you invited this guy to your place, and we're a little worried about that. And this is what they pointed out in their letter here. Yeah, here we go. A concerned district employee has reported that on October 30th, Drake will be allowed to perform for students at an assembly held during the school day. We write to ask that the district cancel this presentation immediately and cease allowing Christian evangelizers to target its students. And if you are going to let this event occur, you have to ensure that Drake does not proselytize, discuss religion, or use the event to invite students to a more explicitly religious event held outside of the school. And let's talk about that for a second, because this is the trick that has been used for years and years by Christian performers. They will say, okay, I do a secular performance for the assembly. But during that assembly, they'll say, hey, kids, did you like my magic show? Because if you did, guess what? I'm going to do it again tonight, and it's free, and you could bring your parents, and I want you to bring your friends, and it's going to be held either at the school, we're renting out the space, or at a local church or something like that. And at that performance, when they have the audience there, They say, now that we have you in your seats, we want you all to come to Jesus. And so, again, if they were just doing that at a church, I don't care. If they were just doing a secular performance at the secular public school, would not care. The thing FFRF pointed out is this guy going to use the daytime assembly to promote a religious conversion performance at night? Because they knew that was going to happen. And they also asked the school, they filed an open records request. We want to know all the communication you had with this guy, because how do you not know this is exactly what he's going to do? So guess what happened? This guy did his show on October 30th, and this is a picture FFRF managed to get. Here he is, Brian Drake, and he's promoting his ministry, Ground Zero, and in the process of doing that, he was encouraging all of them to come to his evening event so he could convert them. That's totally what he was doing, right? According to FFRF, and they posted this on their website later, Drake used the event to promote Ground Zero, his religious ministry. He repeatedly directed students to come to this religious event, handed out tickets to students. Religious representatives from Ground Zero were at the school during the assembly, and at the off-campus event, he tried to convert kids and deliver a clear presentation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, this is the sort of bait and switch that conservative Christians, and never anybody else, it's always them, they can get away with it, especially in conservative areas. Like, and if it's not an illusionist, it's someone who's telling kids not to do drugs, but he's sneaking in a religious alternative. Don't do drugs, kids. Do Jesus. Or maybe it's someone who comes to talk about sex education, but it's someone from a religious ministry who tells them abstinence is the only way forward, and that if you do anything sexual, you are like a glass of water that's been spit in by everyone in this room and no one will want to drink it. More on that next week. So look, you can vet these people. Other guest speakers are always vetted to make sure they're not doing anything they shouldn't be doing. I wonder how this guy was vetted, because this guy knows that as soon as he's in the door, he's going to be able to try to convert them. And you know how I know that? He's bragged about it online for years. This is a picture from Facebook I found. This is from 2019. Check this out. Our school assemblies, he says, are 100% public school friendly by design. We have a passion for reaching communities through the schools. We always want to point the students to a nighttime event where we can share the gospel with them. We never want to do just a show. We wouldn't travel with our kids if it was just about performing and entertaining. Like, he's admitting it right there. The only reason he wants to get in public schools is so he can lure the kids to his white van at night where he can throw baptismal water on them or something. I swear, if this was anything other than Christianity we were talking about, and someone was saying, yeah, I talk to kids during the school day, but don't worry, I invite them to come back at night so that I can get them. That would not be okay in any other context, and somehow it's okay when he's a Christian. They let you do it when you like Jesus. This is, he did it more recently too. This is from 2023, where he says the same thing. We have 100% public school friendly assembly. And then at the bottom, typically after our assemblies, a local church hosts an event with us where they invite their community. We do another mind-blowing show. Then we get the opportunity to share the rest of the story. Yes, we live in a beat-up, broken world. And here's why. And like, again, he's admitting it over and over. What did he tell the school he was going to do? How did they not know he was going to do this? I mean, it's so creepy. Now, here's the thing. I don't know that there's anything FFRF can really do about this, because you know how the response is going to go. The district is going to say, listen, we didn't know he was going to invite kids to the nighttime event, because lying is something they're allowed to get away with. And again, these people were not directly converting kids during the school day. They were just luring them in. There's some plausible deniability built in there. And that's why they wait till night to target them with precision. I guess the best thing for FFRF to do about this stuff is just let people know this is happening, so you as parents, as students, can be on the lookout for this. You should know who's speaking to you, where they're coming from, what their motives are, right? So, I mean, parents have every right to complain. if this is what their local public schools are doing, if they're inviting people who don't actually have educational content, but just want the gig in order to score more tally marks for Jesus. Parents have a right to know that that's going on. And the thing is, there are so many secular options for people you can invite to spread a message in a compelling way or to teach sex ed or whatever it is. There are plenty of good options. They didn't have to go to this guy. So the question is, why did they go to this guy? And it's probably because they value preaching more than teaching. All right, going to pause there. Let's take some questions and then I'll get to the last story here. And while you are pulling that up, I'm going to grab a story here. All right, no questions. Let's keep going. Please subscribe to the newsletter. Give me a second just to compile the rest of this, because this one took up, I swear, half my day yesterday. Okay. I want to tell you, here we go. Let's see if I could pull this up here. Give me 1 second to pull up the right stuff. Okay. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. I know this feels too soon, but we have to talk about it. When the new Congress gets in, when the new people who just got elected get into Congress in January, Republicans will probably have a legislative trifecta, and they'll be able to do pretty much whatever they want legislatively. And that means you should know some, like, who's the next Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or anyone like that. And I want to give you one candidate for that, because I don't think I remember hearing too much about this guy this year, because I don't live where he lives. But one of the guys who will soon have the ability to write laws is a guy named Mark Harris. He's going to be a freshman member of the House from North Carolina. And there's a lot of things he believes that are truly disturbing and that you may not know about. And he has such a fascinating, in a disturbing way, backstory that is worth talking about, because this guy has run for office so many times. In 2014, he ran for U.S. Senate out of nowhere, but he didn't win the Republican primary. It was actually won by Tom Tillis, who I believe is still in the Senate. In 2016, he ran for Congress from North Carolina, and he lost the GOP primary again by a very small margin. So then in 2018, he tried to run for Congress again. And that time he won again by a very thin margin. I think it was 0.4%. He won that race. So here he is. He's a new congressman. He goes to Washington, D.C. for like freshman orientation for the new representatives. And while he's there, back home, the North Carolina Board of Elections is like, wait a minute, there was some weird stuff happening in your election, and we're investigating it. And it turns out that what happened is one of his own staffers was basically committing voter fraud in his district. And here's one of the articles that we're going to talk about. Political operative McCrae Dowless of Bladen County, who was paid over $130,000 by the Mark Harris campaign, allegedly orchestrated the collecting, tampering, and forging of ballots. So this guy was just like filling in a whole bunch of ballots, submitting them by himself as if he were all those people, and that may have contributed to Mark Harris's win. So for all the talk that Republicans offer about we have to stop voter fraud, it's coming from inside the House. They're the ones who are guilty of it, allegedly. So that staffer was so awful in terms of what he was doing, and there was a trial about it. It was so bad that the North Carolina Board of Elections said, we are not certifying these results. Mark Harris, even though you think you won the race, I don't think we can count these numbers. So we're tossing that out, and you're coming to trial for now, at least. And I'm sorry, they didn't toss it out, but they said we're not certifying these results just yet. So they went to trial. And Mark Harris was on the witness stand during the trial. And he said things like, I did not know this was happening. I did not tell this dude to do any of that. But at one point during the trial, there was like a little break. He huddles up with his lawyer. And the next thing you know, Mark Harris goes back onto the stand with like a little piece of paper that he just starts reading. And that paper basically said, a new election is warranted. So Mark Harris read this statement saying, I'm paraphrasing, but whatever the shenanigans are, the way to move forward is we should toss out those election results and we should have a do-over. And that's what happened. Like, he did not end up going to Congress that year. And there was a special election, and Harris decided not to run. This time he cited his health. And so a different Republican ran. Guess what? A different Republican won and held that seat for a couple of terms until this time around when that Republican ended up doing something else. And now Mark Harris decided to run again. So that's how we get to this guy. Mark Harris, by the way, was never charged with any crimes. But also, if you've been in that situation where your own staffer allegedly committed voter fraud on your behalf, maybe you should get out of politics. You've lost your ability to do that. But this past March, he ran for Congress. He won the GOP primary. And this is a red district. So, and it was, by the way, newly gerrymandered to be even redder. So if you win the GOP primary, you're almost guaranteed to win the election. So he was already slated to go to Congress, and this past week he won his race. I just want to point out some of the things this guy believes because it's really disturbing. Because this guy's the pastor of a Southern Baptist church, Trinity Baptist Church, and he has made he has not hid the fact that he wants to Christianize the country. In fact, there's a news outlet called The Assembly that interviewed this guy. And interestingly enough, look at this. Harris reports that in an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, Speaker Mike Johnson was asked about his conservative views. Johnson's response, Harris says, was the quote of the week. Well, he said, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. And Mark Harris is saying, yeah, that if you're asking me about what I believe, I share what Mike Johnson said. That's how I do. Just look at the Bible. That's what I believe. So that's disturbing because the Bible can be interpreted any way you want it, right? So this guy has also, at his church, he has mixed religion and politics. He has invited to his pulpit Ted Cruz, Rick Santorum, remember that guy? Mike Huckabee. And because this is North Carolina, you know who else he invited to his church to speak to his congregation? The Nazi adult film connoisseur, Mark Robinson. He totally invited Mark Robinson because, of course, he invited Mark Robinson. By the way, Mark Robinson issued this endorsement of Mark Harris. Let's read this together. Mark Robinson has been a superb lieutenant governor for North Carolina, and he'll make an even better governor. This is Mark Harris speaking, praising Mark Robinson. I couldn't be more honored to have his endorsement in my race for Congress. And I thank him for his courageous defense of our values, our state, and our country. And we all know Mark Robinson totally became governor after his creepy porn website comments were made public. So anyway, that's the sort of dude he associates with. But the reason I want to bring up Mark Robinson is because when Mark Robinson was invited to Mark Harris's church, Mark Robinson actually made headlines for all the wrong reasons, okay? This is what he said at the time. This is earlier, I believe. When was this? This is March 23rd, 2023. But look at this quotation from Mark Robinson. You see so many pastors right now will say in their pulpits, I don't want this church to be political. I don't want to talk about politics that have anything to do with religion. We used to be religious in this church, and we're going to accept everybody. We're going to accept anything. I'm going to fly a rainbow flag out front. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm saying this wrong. Let me try that again. He's making fun of pastors who are liberal. And he says, you see so many pastors right now will say to their pulpit, in their pulpits, I don't want this church to be political. I don't want to talk about politics that have anything to do with religion. We used to be religious in this church, and we're going to accept everybody. This is all bad, according to Mark Robinson. And then these pastors say, I'm going to fly a rainbow flag out front and spit right in the face of God. That's what Mark Robinson said. If you fly a rainbow flag, you are spitting in the face of God, which, by the way, is a thing I'm pretty sure Mark Robinson is totally fine with. Yes, I said it. Makes me sick every time I see it when I pass a church that flies that rainbow flag, which is a direct spit in the face to God Almighty. So that's what Mark Robinson said when he appeared at Mark Harris's church, just trashing the existence of gay people, the allyship that some churches have with LGBTQ people. So that's troubling, right? I also wanted to point out that when Mark Harris ran in 2018, before he scandaled himself out of a seat, there was some news because we learned about this guy's views on women. And specifically, there was a Democratic political action committee, I believe called American Bridge, but they found one of his old sermons where he talked about the gender roles that people ought to play. And I want to play a short clip for you from that ad.
There's only one word, or one title, I should say, that is given to a man in all of Scripture. Did you know that? In fact, there is only one title that is given to women in all of Scripture. The title in all of Scripture, only one title given to a man, is head. The title given to a woman is helper.
That's it. That's what the Bible says. Man is the head. The woman is a helper. Nothing more than that. That is all she is good for, to be subservient to her husband. And later on in the exact same sermon, he actually went even further, doing like what we would now say might be like a Harrison Butker impression. He basically said, our society is broken because we tell girls they could be anything they want to be. Let me play you that clip.
You and I know that in our culture today, girls are taught from grade school that we tell them that what is most honorable in life is a career. And their ultimate goal in life is simply to be able to grow up and be independent of anyone or anything. But nobody has seemed to ask the question that I think is critically important to ask. Is that a healthy pursuit for society? Is that the healthiest pursuit for our homes? Is that the healthiest pursuit for our children? Is that the healthiest pursuit for the sexes in our generation?
That's seriously what he was going with in his sermon. He says girls are taught they could do anything, that they can have a career and they can be independent. And he's like, is that good for girls that we tell them they could do anything they want to do? Maybe we should tell them, hey, get back in the kitchen. That's what he was implying. So that's his views on women. And now, at a time when women's rights are being curtailed state by state and possibly at a national level, this guy will have the power to write laws that directly affect women. What do you think he's going to do? By the way, on his campaign website, I wanted to show you this. This is what he says about abortion. Mark fervently believes in the sanctity of all human life from conception to natural end. This is a guy who thinks like every sperm is sacred. He thinks that a fertilized egg is the same as a child. This is the sort of person who will want to ban abortion with no exceptions for everyone always. He would be totally in favor of that. That guy is now a Republican in Congress. But that's not the only thing. What about his education policies? Because this is a guy who wants to take money from public schools and supports vouchers for private Christian schools. And in 2018, guess who he got an endorsement from? I was surprised by this because I don't think I remember seeing endorsements like this from this guy so much. But it was from David Barton, the Christian pseudo-historian who has probably done more than anybody else to poison the well of information regarding the supposed influence of religion at our nation's founding. Like David Barton is the guy who says, yeah, every founding father was super religious. And I found the documents that prove it. And then historians are like, You're reading this all wrong. And it doesn't matter because David Barton doesn't speak to smart people. He goes to churches and speaks to ignorant people who are willing to accept whatever he tells them. Here's what David Barton said.
Hi, I'm David Barton, and I'm supporting Mark Harris for U.S. Congress. I've known Mark for many years, and as a pastor and a faith leader, he has repeatedly demonstrated the character, the consistency, and the courage that we need in Washington, D.C.
Like, if David Barton is supporting your candidacy, that doesn't bode well for education anywhere in the country, because David Barton is not interested in strong, healthy public education. What do you think Mark Harris thinks about LGBTQ people? It's not great. In 2013, when he was running his first campaign, he was doing interviews, and someone asked him, like, what do you believe about gay people? And let me play. He said two things that I want to point out. He said being gay is a choice. Mark Harris said being gay is a choice. And the interviewer, who in my view was way too nice, but the interviewer tried to push back on that in a polite way. The interviewer basically said, okay, if you think being gay is a choice, why would anyone choose to be gay at a time when they are so discriminated against and made pariahs and, you know, people mock them and bully them? Why would a kid choose to be gay? And I want to play you Mark Harris's response to all this.
I yet to buy in, as there is not the medical evidence that an individual that chooses the homosexual lifestyle is born that way.
But do you really believe people would make that choice for themselves?
Well, in all honesty, and I think we will just have to agree to disagree
Sure.
on whether it's a choice. I think that the medical, it's almost, to be honest with you, the medical reports or the medical evidence that would be posted, there has been just as much that would say that it is not, that you're not born that way, that it is a choice, as much as there would be volumes that would try to make the case that you are born that way. It's kind of like if you get down to the issue of the evidence of global warming, you've got scientists on both sides.
Like, what the hell was that at the end right there? He says being gay is a choice. And then he says, there are scientists who are on both sides of the issue, just like with global warming. Like, no, there are not scientists on both sides of that issue. All the scientists are on one side of the issue, and you have a couple of idiots on the other side who have no evidence. So this is what he was like in 2013. And listen, there are plenty of Democrats who are also not very LGBTQ friendly back at the time, and they're fully ignorant of stuff. And they've gotten better. This guy has not changed one bit. In fact, in 2019, in 2015, this guy spoke at an event, and this is what he said. This is from Media Matters. But he spoke at an event in North Carolina and complained that the nation is floundering in moral decay, explaining in part that we have watched in one generation where homosexuality was once criminalized to now we see the criminalization of Christianity. So this guy wants to go back to a time when being gay was criminalized. Wait, why? Why would you want to go back to then? And he's claiming that today we're criminalizing Christianity, which is news to me because I figure I would be part of like the force that is trying to get. I'm not doing that. How is Christianity criminalized in any way? No, it's not happening. So not only is he lying about what's happening in Christianity today, he wants to go back to, I guess, the good old days when you could be arrested for being gay. And the thing is, so this year, when he's running for office and he has a chance to win that seat, the Charlotte Observer did an interview. I mean, they asked him the same questions they ask any candidate. And look at how shady his answers are. Look at this from the Charlotte Observer. What would be your top priority if elected? And what does Mark Harris say? To represent the people of North Carolina's 8th district. That's not an answer. And that makes me think you do not want to tell anybody what your top priority is. What do you hope to do if you're president? Represent America. Like, that's not an answer. What are you doing? And this is another one. Will you certify the results of the presidential election? Absolutely. I will proudly vote to certify the results of any election that was conducted fairly and legally. And that last little bit, those are the weasel words Republicans have been using for years now. Like, they're all good with certifying election results as long as they're the winners. Because if they're not the winners, then it wasn't a fair election now, was it? I'm sure you saw this on election day too this week, where Donald Trump started the night like he was saying there was voter fraud in Pennsylvania. And later in the night, as soon as it became clear that he's probably going to win that state and all the other ones, all the election fraud claims by Republicans everywhere basically disappeared. There was zero election fraud this election. Somehow, it was the biggest problem. They were so sure there would be election fraud, but then their guy won and suddenly it all disappeared. Every election is perfect somehow. Like, because they're liars. The entire party is full of liars. Anyway, Mark Harris has already worked with a group that fought for more abortion restrictions in North Carolina. It's the same group that now that pushed a bathroom bill that prohibited trans people from using bathrooms in public spaces that has since been repealed, thankfully. And he's also, you know what he's done this election? He knows that the thing that might prevent him from winning that GOP primary was the scandal of how his former staffer tried to steal that election a couple of years ago. So since then, check this out, his wife published a book in 2021, 13 Ballots, the manufactured scandal that overturned an election. It's an entire book dedicated to like talking about how they were screwed over. They published a book. She says they experienced the, quote, nastiest political trickery imaginable. Hilarious if it wasn't so sad. And I don't have a clip of this because it's long, but when Mark Harris announced his candidacy, some candidates have like a 30-second ad, a minute-long ad to introduce themselves. Mark Harris did like a 5-minute video where he just looks at the camera basically, and he says, they manufactured a scandal to steal the election. Who's they? Democrats, he says later. And he basically spends the whole video saying they tried to stop me. They were able to kick me out of office, but now I'm back and I'm ready for my comeback tour or something like that. He actually said in the video, even in he said this in a news article rather recently, even in 2016 and in 2018, when I won, I felt at times that I almost had to apologize for being a pastor. No more is there any apology at all. Which is a weird thing to say because, one, he did not win in 2018. And literally no one's mad at him for being a pastor. No one cares that this dude is a pastor. We're mad because this guy's a sexist and a bigot. And we're right about that. And we have the video evidence of it. No one cares that he's a pastor. Like, there was a time not that long ago when a guy like him would have been an anomaly in the Republican Party. But now, I swear, a guy who's a bigot and who hates women as much as this guy does and wants to restrict their rights, and a guy who lies about elections and can't handle the fact that he just lost a race and had to cheat to win, that guy is now in the Republican Party's mainstream. Just all he does is push conspiracy theories and lies in the name of Jesus while he steers the country now, because he will soon be in Congress. He's going to steer the country in a direction that directly limits women's choices and restricts the civil liberties of LGBTQ people and anyone else he doesn't like. So I know the big story of the election was Donald Trump, but there are more Republicans that are brand new to Congress that are going to be entering in January. And this is just a glimpse of what they are like. That is why I'm scared. That's why after I take a little break from all this, I'm going to want to play defense. I'm going to want to push back against these people. It's why I'm going to keep supporting the groups that push back against these people. I hope you will join me in that, because this guy should not be in Congress. What questions we got here? That's the last story I had. Oh, thank you for that donation. Do you think it's wise to blame people who couched the election, like sat and didn't vote or voted third party? I think this mindset is dangerous, ignores the point of democracy. You know what was interesting? I have an acquaintance who announced that they were going to vote for a third party, and they live in a swing state. And for the week before the election, I couldn't stop thinking about that because this is someone I respect in like activist circles, but this person was so disturbed by the Democratic Party's position on Gaza and the lack of doing anything for them that this person wanted to vote third party in a swing state. This is a person who knows the stakes, and that bugged me. So I have a couple thoughts about that. Is it wise to blame people who did not vote or voted third party? One, yes, absolutely. A third party was not going to win the race, and you knew that, so you were throwing your vote. What lesson did you teach us? The thing I hate about third parties and the way protest votes are done is that they are only done to hurt Democrats. And Republicans just, without doing anything, get the rewards. That's what bugs me about third party voting. You're not voting third party because your candidate has a chance to win. You're doing it because you don't care if a Republican wins, and you really don't care about your friends who are going to be directly impacted by a Republican administration. So yes, we can absolutely blame people who knew better but did not vote or voted for a third party. I have respect is the wrong word. I don't have respect, but like I get if people don't pay attention to politics or think politics is not for them who sit it out. I wish they wouldn't because it's going to impact them one way or the other. But if you're ignorant, but through no fault of your own, I get why you're not voting. I'm not mad at you. I wish you would talk to us and understand why you should vote the way I want you to vote. But the people who know the stakes, why is it okay to let a Republican win because you want to punish a Democrat? There is no mirror image of that on the other side. You will not see Republicans saying, well, Donald Trump isn't great, so as evangelical Christians, we're going to vote for Jill Stein and we're going to help Kamala Harris get into office. No, of course they don't do that because they know that's stupid. You vote for the guy who, yeah, he sucks, but he's going to let us have power, so we'll do it. Like, if you know about the Supreme Court and how horrible it is, and you know what laws are on the table, the fact that you would not vote for Kamala Harris in this election, you don't care about any of these things you say you care about. I don't know why the protesters who want a free Palestine and want to support Gaza and don't want the U.S. giving unending money and weapons to Israel, how are you better off now that you voted for a third party with Donald Trump in office? I don't get that. So is it wise to blame people? I'm going to think it. I may not strategically want to do it to their face or in public or something like that, but I'm definitely thinking it. And does it ignore the point of democracy? No, because if you're a third party and you want to gain traction, you start locally. You get your candidate to win local seats, state level seats, because voters are more likely to care about policy at the local level more than a party affiliation. Honestly, my mayor right now is a Republican, and that bothers me. However, it's not as bad as if that person were in state legislature or in Congress, because your job is to deal with businesses and potholes and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So if you're a third party and you want to gain traction, do it at the local level where you can influence stuff. Do not be Jill Stein or someone like that who shows up every 4 years to screw over Democrats and then disappears for 3.5 years and does absolutely nothing to build the party. So yeah, go after, screw third party voters. I have very little sympathy for their cause, even though I probably am aligned with their goals. It doesn't make sense. You think I liked everything the Democratic Party was doing? No. There were plenty of activists who put it this way. You're not voting for I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this. You're not voting for who you love. You're voting for the person who gives you the best set of circumstances for you to organize against. You think it's going to be easy to protest Donald Trump and Republicans, or do you think it's easier to sway a Harris administration to do the thing you want? A third party candidate, or the liberal progressive push in 2020 got Joe Biden to give progressives a seat at the table on matters of climate and things like that. That was important. I appreciate and respect the hell out of Ocasio-Cortez, because even though she has been more critical of Democrats than anybody else, she's working within the system to get it to change and knows better than to support a third candidate as opposed to Kamala Harris. She supported Harris, even though she disagrees with Harris on so many important things. That's the way you get shit done. You don't just throw away your vote the one time it matters and hand a victory to a Republican who's going to oppose everything you want, because that just tells me you don't care about trans people. You don't care about women and reproductive rights. You're willing to throw all that under a bus because you didn't get the one thing you wanted. Utterly selfish, utterly stupid, unstrategic. It makes me mad. Now, this is the other thing I had to say. Those voters are not the reason Kamala Harris lost. That's the one reason I'm not as mad at that person today as I was last week. Those third-party voters, they did not swing the election. Other things did, but this was not a Gaza election. This was not a Jill Stein screwed Democrats over election. That's not what did the trick. So, okay, there you go. Cabby says, thought of a better way to phrase this. We here have the privilege of following a lot of things. Most folks who do not have the privilege, look pretty dumb if you are and are really easy to dismiss. I wonder if you're talking about the third party people again. I want to be clear, Cabby. Thank you for that donation, by the way. I'm not mad at people who don't pay attention to politics for whatever reason. They're not interested in it. They have to work all these jobs. They don't have time to turn on the news or read a newspaper. I get that. I sympathize with that. I get that I have a privilege in being able to read and cover this stuff like all the time, right? That's why I am much more upset with people who do follow this stuff and who understand what's on the table and still throw away their vote and reward Republicans every time because they think, what, it's going to change anything? No, now I just don't like you more and I'm less inclined to take you seriously because you don't care about this stuff. If you cared about it, you would help us win so that you could, and then fight. It's just, I don't get the people who show up every 4 years and think they're going to make a difference. Lady Merlin says, as a transgender federal employee, I'm making plans to move to Colorado, a blue state, and get a state government job. Also, Aaron in the Morning, wonderful writer, has a good resource for finding safe states for trans people. Yeah, if you, Den, maybe you could find the link for Aaron in the Morning. But yeah, I agree. It's a scary time if you're a federal employee who is not beholden to Donald Trump. It's really scary if you're a trans person in federal government. And yeah, I mean, if you have the ability to move to a state where your rights are going to be protected, you may want to do that if you're able to. And Lady Merlin, I hope everything is safe and I hope you're able to get that state government job because it's a scary, scary time right now. And Den has that link right there. What's that link? We'll get that up. There we go. Aaroninthemorning.com. You should subscribe to that newsletter if you haven't already. It's really good. Any other questions there? And otherwise, just double checking that I got everything. I think we're done. Thank you so much for sticking around with me. Listen, it's a hard week. Make sure you take care of yourself. I hope you can find some way to get away from politics for a while. Go do the thing that makes you happy. I will tell you that for me, the thing that allows me to get away sometimes is I can just go off into the woods somewhere, go for a long hike where the internet doesn't work, and I can just go for a long walk, and that helps me. Doesn't help that it's cold outside right now, but whatever it is, get some rest, take care of yourself, and then when you are ready, please jump back into the fight and push for the policies you want and be a pain in the ass to the Trump administration. And hopefully some voters who were apathetic last time around will start giving a damn about some of this stuff because that's eventually the way these things change. All right. Have a wonderful night. Thank you to Den for helping out with everything. And I will see you next week.